if you start out running back, who's your favorite third round wide receiver target to sort of catch up at the position?
But Rice would be my favorite. I mean, Rice is like the kind of receiver when we play in the main event, you see the guys who do go running back heavy, they often go for like just give me those targets, man. Let me get those PPR targets. And Rice gives you that. Plus, I think big time upside is Mahomes' clear underneath to intermediate number one target, taking up some of those Kelsey targets this year.
What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Identifying the best possible picks at the running back position. Theo Greminger on School of Scott with Scott Barrett here every week over at Fantasy Points. And today we're joined by Pat Kerrane of Legendary Upside and also Ship Chasing. This should be a great one. This is the first time that Scott and Pat have podcasted with one another. So really, really excited for this one. Two of the sharpest guys in fantasy. So let's just get it going right off the top. No time to waste. Are you in or out on Saquon Barkley this year, Pat? Last year was just an unbelievable season for him. The points speak for themselves. He led the league in runs over 20 yards, led the league in runs over 40 yards. Obviously, he had the 2,000-yard season, the RB1 overall finish, and it's capped off with a phenomenal playoff performance from him and an Eagles Super Bowl victory. Now you've got to take Saquon somewhere inside the top 3 picks in the NFL draft. There's been some fading of him recently at the top in high-level best ball and redraft leagues like the FFPC and Underdog. And I think a lot of it's based on the 482 touches that Saquon accumulated last year. Are you in or out this year, Pat, at Saquon at this price?
Well, I mean, kind of one of the beauties of best ball, which I do a ton of now, is that like you don't have to be like fully out on Saquon, and so I'm not fully out on Saquon. I think though I would probably be more on team out than team in terms of like what my season's really going to be about. And in part, I think because a lot of the high stakes stuff that I do is the FFPC, and I'm super Bowers pilled, so like I want like Bowers to be part of my season, what makes or breaks my season in tight end premium. And so that creates that additional opportunity cost other than Chase, right at the top there in drafts. I don't necessarily though see like a huge distinction between, Barkley and Bijan and feeling that I need to prioritize Bijan over Barkley. It would be more that I really like Jefferson. And so when I'm starting my best ball drafts, I'm kind of breaking ties to Jefferson over Barkley and Bijan. I'm taking Chase when I have the chance to take Chase. And then as I said, in tight end premium, I love Bowers there. So it would be more about, I really like starting with the pass catcher, especially this year, right at the top of the draft. Those are the guys that I feel like it dries up so quickly and I can't kind of get basically the 2v2s that I'm looking at throughout the rest of the draft. I end up being happier when I take the pass catcher personally, but hard to completely fade Barkley after the season he just turned in last year and the playoffs.
Yeah, and the terminology 2v2s, just kind of explain that. I know Davis Maddock has come on a number of the pods here at Fantasy Points. He uses the same terminology, but sort of explain that for our listeners.
Yeah, so I mean, literally just saying like if I could get Jefferson, Bucky Irving, or Saquon Barkley, and T Higgins, or something like that, I prefer the Jefferson Bucky side of that 2v2, and you can kind of keep doing that because there's a pretty big pocket of running back value this year where the wide receivers do dry up pretty quickly. And like looking at the wide receiver pricing from last year, there's the thing that I regret is like taking the unexciting profiles in kind of rounds 3, 4, 5, the Christian Kirks of the world, where there was actually running back upside available. And so I basically want to say, hey, if there's running back upside later, and there is, because this rookie class really has put a ton of upside kind of throughout the draft, and there's also some really interesting veteran profiles. then, I can potentially hit on those guys and pair them with these wide receivers who really are worth taking early, as opposed to trying to pair the running backs with some of the wide receiver profiles that have been kind of inflated a little bit. Wide receivers are more expensive than they used to be. Not every wide receiver kind of deserves that inflated price.
Scott, we talked a lot about Saquon last year on School of Scott. We haven't really talked about him at all this year because he's sort of a take for granted type value at ADP. When you're doing your initial research towards the top of drafts, do you think you're in or out on this profile this year?
Yeah, I'm probably not going to be drafting a ton of Saquon, which isn't really an argument against Saquon. It's more just, to Pat's point, has to do with positional value or other players. Like it's not a specific knock against Saquon, but to, answer your original question is like the 400 plus touch thing. For those who aren't aware, there's like a number of studies talking about how over the past 20 years, running backs who had a 400 plus touch season, something like 85% of that list sees a drop off in production the following season. It gets especially bad later in age. Our good friend Abib Agbatova, if you don't know who that is, it's like the best high stakes fantasy player ever. I think he told us a couple of days ago, he's like totally out on Saquon just because he always fades the super high touch guys in the following season. I actually don't think this is super valid, or like this isn't a reason for me to fade Saquon, or I wouldn't be too worried about it. And that's just because 400 plus touches is incredibly rare and incredibly valuable. There's really no one else in Philadelphia I'm worried about, eating into his touches. And so when you talk about, 85% of the list seeing a drop off from production, it's like, duh. Because he just had 400 plus touches, which is so incredibly rare and valuable. And if you look at that list, it's like 70% of the list, would have finished as a top 12 fantasy running back last year. There's also plenty of outliers, like Tiki Barber basically hit over 400 plus touches in each of his last 5 seasons. When he was really up there in age, and he was like a league winner in every single one of those years. So that's not the argument against Saquon. I haven't finalized my running back rankings, but if he's not my RB1, it's really just because there's someone else I just like so much more. Again, I think Pat was largely right when he talked about the 2v2s and positional value, especially in an FFPC league.
And Pat, we heard a lot of the same arguments about fading the volume on an older running back for many, many years with Derrick Henry. That got a lot of drafters in trouble over the years. My question for you would be, Saquon last year, the one aspect of his game that sort of fell off a little bit expectedly in Philadelphia was the pass catching ability. Jalen Hurts also had DeAndre Swift the year before, and we saw Swift's pass catching numbers also dip. Targeting the running back position has not really been something that we've seen in a Jalen Hurts-led offense. Do you think that there's a chance that could be unlocked a little bit more with Kevin Patullo taking over as offensive coordinator, or is that something we should just kind of brush to the side based on the offense?
Yeah, I'm not super willing to buy into Barkley becoming a big-time pass catcher. I mean, for one, you have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith there. Yeah. You have better options to push the ball downfield if you're dropping back to pass. Hurts can run, obviously. So it's not like Barkley can catch the ball. That's not the problem. But it's sort of, what does he add to the offense? And it's the explosive running ability, plus behind that offensive line, kind of the deadly consistency of it. So, I think that I would expect Barkley to be used pretty similarly to last year. One of the reasons I was fading Barkley last year is because I was like, there's the tush push. So he's not going to score a bunch of rushing touchdowns. And he's probably not going to be used a ton as a receiver. And I was noting, hey, his receiving efficiency has been down for years. He had 0.94 yards per route run in 2022, 0.92 in 2023. He was at 0.94 last year. So my argument kind of worked, except I missed the part where he was going to be the engine of an offense behind the best offensive line in the league, ripping off explosive runs constantly, literally leaping over dudes. So, I got buried, but it's like that was the path. And I think it still is the path. It's that you're betting on him to be, by rush yards over expected, he was the most efficient season we've ever seen. Before last year, Derrick Henry was actually even slightly more efficient in rush yards over expected, but that also occurred last year. So, he put a better season on record than had existed entering last year by some margin. And I think you're just betting on him to keep doing that, to just be this incredibly efficient runner behind that offensive line. And with how potent the offense is, I think it's a totally reasonable bet to make. I'm skeptical, though, that there's going to be like some different flavor of the Saquon amazing season, though.
Something I think about constantly, and like I have no way to like bake this into my rankings, but it's like Jalen Hurts had more rushing touchdowns than Saquon Barkley last year. Like how many rushing touchdowns would Barkley have had if Jalen Hurts, broke a rib in like week 2? Would he have had 25 rushing touchdowns?
Yeah.
And just broken leagues? Probably.
Yeah.
I think does a Jalen Hurts injury help him?
Who's their backup now?
No, I don't think that. I would push back on that one because the overall offensive engine would go down, and Hurts is just so good for that offense. Yeah. And I think the threat of Hurts probably opened up some of those.
It might.
I don't know. This is the contingent upside for Saquon Barkley if Jalen Hurts misses time is not something that I've kind of gone through. Maybe
I was saying like I also was saying like if he just broke a rib, right? So he's still on the field. He's just they're not going to risk the tush push. Could he have had 25 touchdowns? Probably. But it's also like you take out Jalen Hurts, you put in the backup, and it's like Tanner McKee, who by the way was awesome. I think targets probably go up at least a little bit. Rushing touchdowns go up.
I just think the thing with Barkley is like last year is that you had the Eagles were literally running the ball half the time.
Yeah.
Which is insane in the modern offense, in the modern NFL. But they were able to do that in part because you do have the threat of the pass with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts. Like you cannot just load up the box.
Mm-hmm.
And Barkley, he didn't face like a ton of 8-man boxes because you can't play the Eagles like that. They put teams in a no-win position last year. So that's where I think that you want that formula. Like, give me that again, please. That sounds great. I agree that if there wasn't the tush push, his upside would be even higher. But the path to getting there probably hurts the passing.
Low percentage probability of that occurring.
Yeah.
Well, there's a number of contenders that are challenging Saquon Barkley at the beginning of drafts right now, including Bijan Robinson. Pat, legendary upside is you're putting out awesome work over there. And right now people can try it for free.
That's right. Yeah, we have a free trial going, 5-day free trial on both the leg up tier. There's 2 tiers. The leg up tier includes all the content, the rankings. And then we also have the sidekick tier, which includes all of that, plus our dynamic rankings tool, which is now powered by Sims. So we have realistic scores for every week of the season and able to help put together teams that account for who you've already drafted in terms of like the type of player that guy is. Like if you've drafted 3 rookie running backs, which I did with Pete Overzet the other day on Best Ball Breakfast, you're going to start to see some players who help get you there because you have this late season upside already. And that's kind of what the sidekick can now bake in. So if you want to check that out, 5-day free trial, legendaryupside.com and legendaryupside.com/sidekick if you want to read about the dynamic rankings tool we got there.
Yeah, and also big shout out for the work you do on ship chasing. A really fun pod. Let everybody know when that's dropping.
Yeah, ship chasing. Just did ADP chasing this morning. If you want to circle back, had a long discussion on Bowers and some of the risers and fallers as we do every week. Not Bowers every week, but close. And then ship chasing we do Thursdays. Right now we're doing 3 p.m. We'll shift to later in the day once we start drafting main events, which is kind of how we do our July and August once things really kick off. So we'll be switching kind of to that mode pretty soon. Actually taking the week off because Pete's coming down to New York. We're going to hang out on Thursday, but yeah, back on our regular schedule next Thursday.
Yeah, check out all of Pat's work. And Scott, every single week we're going to identify. We're actually recording like 2 School of Scots a week now, so maybe twice a week We're going to identify some key fantasy points, data, statistics, and tools. This week, we're talking about missed tackles forced per attempt. And this is a really good one. Last week, we talked about the bell cow report. We're back on running backs this week. If you want to find Scott and my thoughts on sort of the traditional dead zone running backs, we had Derek Brown on last week. That was a really good show. But Scott, maybe talk a little bit about missed tackles forced per attempt.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite stats. You know, it really measures a running back's skill independent of his offensive line. And I always think about with this stat, Kenneth Walker, who led the league in missed tackles forced per attempt last season, or maybe was tied with James Conner. But yeah, like he could do that, elite tackle breaker, and then he has elite breakaway speed. And then he's just saddled with and he can catch passes now, like great volume in the passing game. He's just been saddled with a bottom 3 offensive line every year of his career. And I would just love to see what he could do fully healthy, no sports hernias, and like an average offensive line. But yeah, shout out Fantasy Points data. You can access that in our advanced rushing tool.
Yeah, and one of the running backs that I'm very much into this season is Bijan Robinson. He's my pick to finish as the RB1 overall. I've been drafting him pretty frequently, as high as the 102, and he forced 60 missed tackles last year. So he was 3rd overall on Fantasy Points data in the raw missed tackles forced. Last year, Bijan had a huge step up in production, got away from Arthur Smith, and really seemed to thrive under Zach Robinson. He had 365 touches, 61 of which were receptions, 15 total touchdowns, and he had over 1,450 rushing yards. 23 years old, Pat. This feels like this could be a peak Todd Gurley type season from Bijan in a Sean McVay-esque offense in Atlanta. Your overall vibes and feelings about having to draft Bijan with a top 3 pick this year?
Yeah, I mean, Bijan's one of those guys. Recently on Underdog, he flipped Saquon Barkley, and I was like, okay, I guess we're doing that now. Yeah. That's not like, it's just one of those things where I don't want to, especially the running backs, the order in which we draft them, I don't feel strongly about, and I don't want to be fading Bijan. I have some of the same kind of like, do I want to take a running back here questions that I do with Saquon, where I really like Justin Jefferson. He's still the guy I want to take second off the board. But I totally get the enthusiasm for Bijan. Where I think his kind of legendary upside, where the season really is about Bijan, I think is very much related to Michael Penix and the strength of the overall offense. Because what you have in Bijan is very well-rounded player. He can be involved in the passing game, not hyper efficient as a receiver, but good enough. And, a very good runner, great tackle breaker, very consistent runner, really strong success rate, big guy, can handle a ton of work. Tyler Algier is a good player who will mix in some, but there's a pretty clear gap between these two guys. So the big question to me is like, can Bijan get loaded up with enough high value touches because this offense is really, really cooking? And that's how I think he would deliver value, where he was sort of the obvious guy to be taking at the top of the draft. He's a little bit different, I think, than a McCaffrey or a Kamara or one of these guys where you could just kind of see it going through incredible receiving volume plus enough rushing volume. Like, I think he is more of the true kind of overall workhorse bet, maybe more in like an Arian Foster mold, to go back about a decade or more now. But that's kind of the mold I would think he's in. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a very plausible path.
Scott, your thoughts on Bijan?
Yeah, I think I like Saquon more. You said with Zach Robinson, are we going to get a peak Todd Gurley season from him? And the thing about peak Todd Gurley is, at the time, that was the best offense in football by a landslide. And this Zach Robinson wasn't even a coach yet. He kind of got the declining era of like both the offense and Todd Gurley. And so like, it's not about usage. Bijan's usage was great from what was it, week 9 on. He led all running backs in fantasy points per game, ranked top 3 in carries, top 3 in targets. It was really just, so he had Todd Gurley usage. It's just, are you going to get the Todd Gurley offensive environment? I don't think you can. You're going to need this offense to go from middle of the pack to like best in the league, or it's going to have to average another touchdown per game. And I don't think I have that confidence in this offense. I also brought this up to you and you kind of hand waved it, and you're probably right, but it's like, yeah, sure, there's a big gap between Bijan and Algier in terms of talent, but it's also a grueling 17 game schedule. And like Algier, I do think is, one of the top 5 best RB2s in the league.
For sure.
But yeah, I mean, like, he's awesome. Like he's an easy top 3 running back. It's just, I don't know. I don't think, I think I like Saquon more.
Yeah, I'll stick with Bijan. I just think for me, it's a little bit of ageist in me where I want to embrace this 23-year-old back. But I do think that there is a lot of room to run for this Falcons offense. And Pat, you talked about the pass catching ability for Bijan. Is he a dynamic pass catcher or is he an opportunistic pass catcher? I think maybe a little bit more of the latter. But I think one thing that has been interesting with some of the beat reporters is Ray McCloud seems like he's going to take a lesser role this year. They're working in additional pass catchers. And when we look at the 87 targets for McCloud last year, if we can just divvy those out to other players and sort of have him be a little less relevant, then I think that creates other opportunities. I also think you both sort of talked about how Bijan got going over the second half of the year. He didn't have a 20-point week until like week 6. And then just started ripping them off right and left. So I think that there is a little bit of enthusiasm there. And I think that the offense does have a little bit of room to run with Penix. So we're all sort of in on Bijan. I think I'm a little bit higher on him than you guys are. The ultimate fantasy litmus test, and I think a player that really could decide leagues this season, is Jahmyr Gibbs. Scott, we talked about this last week in context with our David Montgomery discussions. But Pat, my question to you is, if this offense in Detroit, going from Ben Johnson to John Morton, simply shifts to a 65% Jahmyr Gibbs instead of a 50-50 split with David Montgomery, then can we not make an argument that Jahmyr Gibbs should be like the 101 this year? He was unbelievable down the stretch, and just there was so much on display, including the playoff loss to Washington, where David Montgomery was back for that one, and he seemed to be sort of phased out, and a lot of it was the game plan. But Gibbs is just so talented, such a special player. Should we be drafting him like he's going to see an increased usage, or do you think we need to be a little bit more pragmatic and it's going to be the Dan Campbell, a lot of David Montgomery, a little bit more than we'd like to see offense?
Yeah, so the kind of the idea behind legendary upside, it comes down to sort of the opportunity cost is really high in the early rounds, obviously, and you have the chance with these receivers to get some of those like locked and loaded picks that are available. And if you're going to take the chance with the running backs, you're probably taking like more of a chance than it feels like you're taking. Like Bijan does have some risk because he's got functionally a rookie quarterback. He's never had the type of season that is actually worthy of like being the kind of the 101 level pick. We're projecting ahead. It's a reasonable projection. Saquon just had this huge workload. He's an older back. We kind of need, it's a bet on this like really unique status quo. They lose the OC. Like, what if they can't kind of put it all together again? Like, there's a lot of risk with these guys. Whereas a lot of times with the receivers, it's like, I don't know, he's just like one of the very best receivers in the entire league. And these guys earn targets. They're in good offense. They have a good quarterback. They have long connection with the quarterback, whatever it is. At least not always the case. I guess Jefferson doesn't, but certainly with like a CeeDee Lamb or Jamar Chase. But you're taking on risk with these running backs. Is the upside worth it? And Gibbs, and I would say Bijan and Saquon, I think the upside's there too. But like Gibbs has probably a higher ceiling than both those guys. I think the upside is clearly worth it with Gibbs. And like all you really need is for them to play the better player. And like one of the things that I think is interesting about the Lions Gibbs saw his yards per route run jump up from 0.97 as a rookie to 1.67 last year. So that was a really exciting and interesting jump. You also have David Montgomery last year at 2.24 yards per route run. He led the league in yards per route run if you have the target threshold low enough, because he only had like 30 something targets. He wasn't getting used a ton as a receiver, but he was really, really efficient when he was used. That's, I think, in large part because David Montgomery was often the guy they were using on play action. He had 27 targets just alone on play action. I think he had 37 overall. He had 267 yards on play action. And that's quite a bit more actually than Gibbs. Gibbs had 19 targets, 169 yards on play action. David Montgomery acting as their kind of more traditional between the tackles back was actually really helping him in the receiving game as well. If Gibbs can just be more of the traditional running back, and to your point, get like 65% of the snaps, I'm very excited for how that will juice his production in both the running game and the receiving game. We know he's so explosive. You know, we saw in the playoff game against the Commanders, like what it looks like when Jahmyr Gibbs gets the work. He does have the path to be kind of the next Alvin Kamara, to really have it be like, this is a game that rewards players for catching the ball. He can catch the ball with the best of them. He can rip off explosive plays in the receiving game. And now he's getting enough work in the running game and getting enough the goal line work to where, you know, he just feels inevitable. So Gibbs is, because he's cheaper and because, frankly, I think his ceiling is probably the highest of the three guys, I'm not really messing around. I'm a little bit overweight on Gibbs, not massively so, but I'm kind of playing it a little bit loose with Barkley and Bijan, where I'm not completely fading them, but I'm a little bit underweight. Gibbs, I just like, this dude could just be the point of 2025.
Scott, Alvin Kamara with 1,500 rushing yards, peak Alvin Kamara with 1,500 rushing yards sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be awesome.
Scott, your thoughts? I know we talked a little bit about Gibbs last week with Debro, but anything after what Pat said?
Yeah, I feel like we've talked about this a bunch. It's really just one of two things happens, or maybe three things. But last year, when they were both healthy, this was a perfectly even 50-50 split by XFP. David Montgomery was signed to a contract extension, and then he got hurt. And then what happened? We got like peak 2019 Christian McCaffrey, Jahmyr Gibbs going absolutely nuclear. And so has that earned him more work with his size that they always talk about, and Dan Campbell talking about consistently the grueling 17-game schedule and needing to spell guys? Could he be a bell cow, or maybe it's just like a 70-30 split instead of a 50-50 split? Because even when it was 50-50, he was still like RB5 by fantasy points per game, just because he was the most efficient runner by EPA per carry. And then as a pass catcher, he's elite. Ryan Heath had this like great tweet he put out. I'm going to butcher it, but he put it out earlier today. It was something like, on first and 10 targets, Jahmyr Gibbs averaged like 9.5 yards per target with a negative ADOT, and Amon-Ra St. Brown averaged like 8.2 yards per target with like an 8 ADOT. And it's like, dude is just such an absolute freak. So I'm still kind of struggling with weighing these pros and cons and range of outcomes. So I'm just kind of letting you know the way I'm thinking about it. I think there's another guy with like similar upside to Jahmyr Gibbs not needing anyone to get hurt, but we'll talk about him in a little bit.
I guess I don't think Gibbs needs anyone to get hurt. I think they need them. He needs his coaches to reflect reality, which is that he is clearly better than David Montgomery at this point. And I don't. But
that was the case all of last year, and then Monty signs this fat contract.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I do hope that, then having seen what the post-contract world looks like, right, and Gibbs kind of taking it to another level too, would have them going, yeah, I don't know if we want to go back to that. Let's feed the guy who deserves to be fed. And I do trust Dan Campbell to kind of play his best players. That's something I think he does a decent job of. So one of the reasons I like this is a dynasty thing where like how right do I have to be? I don't even think I need to be like if Gibbs gets 80% of the snaps, game over, he was the right pick. Like that I don't think anyone would argue that. Like it was Gibbs. But I don't think we expect that I don't expect that to happen. But like it's nice that if it does, I insta win the season. If he just gets to 65, I think I still can win. And that can happen without a Montgomery injury. It can happen with just kind of the natural course of the way the NFL goes, that the young running back in his third season displaces the older veteran who's declining a little bit, especially down the stretch. And then kind of the framework I also think about is like, I'm flipping over a team, right? If I get really lucky in a Best Bowl Mania style tournament, I'm going to flip over a team that got through the gauntlet of the single week eliminations. If I show up with if I see which running back I have, who do I want? Who made it? Who did I get to week 17 with? I think it's Gibbs. Gibbs is the guy who I'm like, all right, I'm going to war with Gibbs in week 17. Presumably he's had a decent enough run because I'm here. And, if I get the full workload with Gibbs in week 17, I think I'd just go up against anybody with that.
35 points against Washington in the playoffs, 46 points in week 18. And the 3 weeks before that, he was north of 25 fantasy points in every single week. I mean, he's unbelievable. Let's turn it to Scott for this one, because this is one that I think is going to really, really test you, Scott. Two players you're really high on this season, De'Von Achane and Christian McCaffrey. You don't have to necessarily make the decision head-to-head. Sometimes we're seeing De'Von Achane go in the early second round in FFPC main events. You could conceivably have a Christian McCaffrey, De'Von Achane team from the turn. But if head-to-head you had to make this call and you had one fantasy team this year, would you go with De'Von Achane or Christian McCaffrey?
I would go with Achane. I love Christian McCaffrey. I think like my first ever Vault Me hot take was before CMC was ever drafted. I said he was going to be in the Hall of Fame. But he's also missed 10 or more games in 3 of his last 5 seasons, getting up there in age. Like he's clearly lost a step. Like even 2 years ago when he was awesome, clearly lost a step from his, 1,000 year. He was still amazing, still the best running back in football, best running back in fantasy football. And then like last year was so bizarre. I know all the injury experts are optimistic. I still love him, but we're talking about versus Achane. And then like, who is De'Von Achane? He averaged 7.8 yards per carry in 2023. That was the most ever by a running back. He did that as a rookie. And then last year in 2 games, he was on pace for 104 catches and 819 receiving yards. Jonnu Smith competing for targets in the same area of the field, no longer there. I think there's a very real chance we see Achane get a 1,000 season. That was another one of my best ever predictions was calling that the year CMC did it. And I think Achane could do it this year. And I don't think anyone else has that upside, with the lone exception being Jahmyr Gibbs. If he gets that, 70% of the work or more, which by the way, I think you guys convinced me. I think I'm coming back around on that, but yeah, as a rookie, 800 rushing yards on 103 carries, had 100 more carries last year. But the offensive line was bottom 3. Tua wasn't healthy. And I could really see him breaking leagues this year. I think, should he be the number 1 running back drafted? Like, I think his chances of finishing as the overall RB1 are at least as good as everyone else. And then if you promise me Tua wouldn't miss a game this year, like, would I take him 101?
Pat, 6 receptions per game in games with Tua Tagovailoa last year. Now Jonnu Smith is out of the mix. You have to think Achane's expected reception numbers are going to be similar or better than last year. We saw the yards per carry go down. They made improvements on the interior of the offensive line. They've talked about using Achane a little bit more as an inside runner, which sort of gets me excited if you go back to sort of how good he was at Texas A&M and his rookie season with that one. I'm all over Achane in this debate. Where are you at it?
I would be McCaffrey of the two. But I guess I'm like, every day that goes by, I'm becoming more bullish on Achane. I was pretty out on Achane, like in the big board and, the pre-draft period. one thing, he was kind of going at the 1-2 turn then and actually fell a little bit after the draft. So it was easier to get back in. But I just was like, this is what's going to happen. Like, and then everything that happened would basically be the best case scenario that I didn't think was going to happen. They don't really add anybody. Ollie Gordon's the only draft addition. They get rid of Jonnu, who I do think, those were kind of similar targets. Jonnu was getting a ton of screens. It would make a lot of sense for some of those to go to Achane now. I think that really helps him. I'm not too worried about Jalen Wright, really eating into the workload that much. I would kind of push back on the idea that the offensive line looks better, or I don't think the offensive line is good at all.
No, that's, and I'll say, we had Scott DiBenedetto last week on School of Scott, our offensive line expert, and he strongly disagrees with me on this take. There are some vibes with the beat reporters, though. They really like Savanea, the rookie guard from Arizona. They like Daniels, who they signed as a free agent. So I think it's more of internal optimism from some of the beats rather than like actual offensive line experts who clearly agree with you, Pat, on that one. That's just my own personal vibes.
I was just looking at it today, and they lost Teron Armstead to retirement, and then they have a guy who struggled last year that's going to replace him at left tackle, second-round rookie from last year. So it's like maybe the interior's improved, but that's a framing device, I think, in some ways. I think, what about the exterior?
Listen, guys, it's all about vibes here with that one. If you want to listen to Scott DiBenedetto completely rip Miami's offensive line to shreds, they were not the worst offensive line, but they were like bottom 5 for him. The worst was Houston. That was a really, really good pod. Highly recommend that one. But anything else sort of add on this Devon Achane, and also just kind of expand your ideas on Christian McCaffrey? I'll ask you one question, Pat. Do you think we could see a little bit more of a second back mixed in San Francisco this year? There's been some people sort of saying this could be a Guerrero, could replace some of the Debo touches and just use him a little bit more to keep CMC fresh for the rest of the season. Does that sort of limit your ceiling outcome for a CMC argument versus Achane here if we see a little bit more of a second back on a weekly basis?
I'm not worried about CMC's ceiling at all. I think CMC's ceiling is insanely good, high, everything you want. It's his floor that worries me, because you get this older back who missed basically all of last season, didn't look like himself in the 3 games he did play. And so, like, is he not CMC anymore? And then, that's kind of the floor outcome. And then, he's not going to be producing like CMC, and you wasted a first-round pick, which I think is a plausible outcome, concerningly plausible. There's 2 guys really in the league that I just trust to not be able to control themselves, and it's Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. They're going to put the running back that they trust on the field. Like, Kyle Shanahan could sit down and show me his plan for Isaac Guerrero to come, to fill in for CMC X number of snaps every game, and the whole offseason is built on. Okay, sure. Great, Kyle. Talk to me in week 10. You're going to play CMC the whole game because you're going to need to win, and you trust CMC to do the CMC stuff. Like, it's just going to happen. I just know it is. If CMC, he's going to get the CMC treatment. I feel very strongly about that. It's just, is he CMC? It's kind of binary. Like, if he's CMC, big win. If he's not CMC, big loss. In Scott Fishbowl, which is like all about the volume this year, I took CMC, I think, at the 108. I was like, yeah, okay, I'll see. Like, if it's, I think I just won my league. If it's and if it's not, better luck next year. So I think you have to be comfortable with the really low floor, but I don't worry about the ceiling with CMC. I kind of worry a little bit about the ceiling with Achane compared to CMC, in part because last year, the rushing efficiency, it didn't just go down, it cratered. He was a rush yards over expected hero 2 years ago. He was behind Alexander Madison last year, just ahead of Javonte Williams, minus 81 rush yards over expected on 203 carries. Not what you want to see. That, I think, speaks to the offensive line. It speaks to an offense that wasn't scaring anyone, an offense that could only move the ball with those shallow targets, an offense that was honestly more afraid than the defense because they were worried they were going to lose Tua to another concussion. So I think the upside case for Achane is, what if you get the efficiency from 2 years ago paired with the receiving usage from last year? But I feel that receiving usage is somewhat of a symptom of the offense not being able to support the rushing efficiency in the first place, not being able to attack downfield with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, who both saw their efficiency crater last year. And a lot of that, as we know, is like, we got to get the ball out super quick with Tua. He's talking about that being a key point. He wants to get the ball out quicker this year. That's like the thing he's working on. So I would be more excited about Achane if this offense felt like it could kind of breathe and open things back up and attack deep downfield again, attack the middle of the field like they were 2 years ago. Then I'd start to think about Achane as like almost like a Barkley type, but with more receiving. And that's the type of ceiling where you go, okay, this dude he maybe should be the 101. I think that, to me, it's still the offensive line that really worries me. And then their knowledge that Tua is in concussion away from potentially missing the rest of the season, and just really wanting to limit the amount of hits that he takes, which can be, leaning on your running back as both a runner and receiver. But Achane's a slighter guy. I don't think we're going to have him get like loaded up with carries. It is going to be kind of efficiency or the receiving points that, are so great for fantasy. Him getting there, kind of hopefully both of those ways. Yeah, and I just worry about the offense being able to support the rushing efficiency side.
I think Miami is like one of the skeleton keys to FFPC tournament style leagues and underdog tournament style leagues, where to me they have the same ceiling they had in 2023, where like we're talking about DeAndre Swift, and like I've tweeted about this every year. It's just like, if DeAndre Swift gets 50% of the work, he's going to be a mid-range to low-end RB1. If he gets 70%, he's going to be the most valuable running back. If he gets 85%, he's going to be peak Christian McCaffrey, right? And it's the same thing with Miami, like especially peak Miami. In 2023, Tua led the league in passing yards or passing yards per game. And Miami's backfield led the league in rushing yards, rushing touchdowns. We talk about Detroit's backfield being so valuable, and it's just like, what if it all went to one guy? Well, they had 9 more rushing touchdowns or 9 more total touchdowns, their backfield did, than Detroit that year. 20 more catches, more rushing yards, more rushing touchdowns. And while Tua was going crazy through the air. And then last year, it was awful. And I think they have the same floor that they had last year. And so it's just like wide range of outcomes that you'll want to lean into in a tournament style league like that. In a 1 QB, typical like friends and family ESPN league, it's different. The risk matters a bit more. And like, what does it come down to? I think it comes down to Tyreek's level of buy-in, which I think comes down to Tua's health, or maybe it just all comes down to Tua's health. But to me, it's really like Achane. Like there's a really good chance like you have the guaranteed bell cow usage, and it's just, is this offense going to be best in the league like it was 2 years ago, or as bad as it was last year, or somewhere in between? And like we saw how bad it was last year, and he was still in Tua starts, the RB1, the RB2. So to me, I think it only gets better, and like how good can it get is like insanely break leagues levels of good.
Yeah, I mean, I think his value definitely rose on the Jonnu trade, because like they were utilizing Jonnu like kind of a crazy high amount for a tight end in the screen game. He easily led the position, and it just make all the sense in the world for some of that to go to Achane. So I wish I had more Achane. I'm slightly underweight. He's moved up. I took him the other day. We'll see if the draft gets tossed, but I had something like, I must have gotten like Nico Collins or Puka, and then someone did something really weird. They took like a quarterback. They might have taken Burrow at the 112, and I'm like, all right, I now have a guy getting pushed down to me that's like an extra pick past. Who do I want that like I won't have access to? Like, what combination am I not going to have access to? What am I going to feel best about having like used this like freebie pick on? And it was Achane. I took Achane. So I was like, he's the guy that I'm going to have a hard time pairing with the first round dude in the future. So, I do think he should move up. I don't think I'll be taking him ahead of CMC, but the case just kind of has gotten stronger and stronger since the offseason began.
All right, so one thing I think is very interesting is throughout the draft process, Ashton Jeanty was a player that we talked about as this generational prospect. People were sort of head over heels for him. It was a unanimous rookie 101 pick. Pat, I know we did a podcast with John Daigle where we talked about Ashton Jeanty, just how enthusiastic we were about him, how we were both sort of like, he's the 101 in all formats. That was sort of unquestioned. And that was somewhat reflective of this quarterback class. But we get to redraft season, and now we're actually starting to see a little bit of Ashton Jeanty discounts. I got him at the 202 in an FFPC main event, something I didn't necessarily anticipate when he was drafted. And we've seen him go as low as the 206 in the 350 contest in FFPC recently. And I think a lot of that is the CMC enthusiasm, how CMC flipped him in multiple ADP sources. And also you have a little bit more variance now with some of the Devon Achane enthusiasm. And certainly when it comes down to it, the Trey McBride and multiple wide receivers going around that 1-2 turn, especially with FFPC ADP. But what's interesting is Jeanty as a prospect, we were mentioning guys like Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott for that sort of fantasy impact. And now you're paying a Najee Harris rookie season main event price tag. Is Jeanty going to turn out to be just the best value in fantasy football? He could potentially lead all running backs in touches. Where are you at on this one, Pat?
Yeah, I think the tricky part with Jeanty is that we just don't typically see Saquon Barkley is the only rookie that we've had one of these legendary seasons. And the way I define that was 23 plus PPR points per game. And he got there in part by just being a key piece of the passing game in his rookie season in a way that it kind of repeated like a little bit a couple years later in a limited sample, but it's really been more of the explosive breakaway runner since. What we normally see is that the second year guys is where we tend to see like even the elite running backs kind of pop off. Like Christian McCaffrey would be a good example, where it was the second year he flashed a lot in the rookie year, but then it was the second year where he put it all together and was the workhorse plus the receiver. I think that's probably still the most likely thing with Jeanty, to where you would expect him to be really good in his rookie season, but maybe not paying off that late first round tag. I've actually started to cool on him a little bit post draft because the price went up. Pre-draft, when you could get him at the 1-2 turn or in the early second, I was more into it. And it's not just like an arbitrary thing there. I think the receivers that go all the way to the end of the first round with, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Nico Collins, Brian Thomas, like I want those guys. I really, really want those guys. And if they're gone, a guy like Jeanty looks like I'll take Jeanty over Drake London for sure, but it's about what the opportunity cost is. And it's gotten a little pricey for me on Jeanty, not like full fade, but just someone that I'm having trouble prioritizing right now, even though I really do love him as a prospect. And on FFPC, if you're talking about mid-second, give me Jeanty.
Scott, you had a tweet that was a great tweet, and I absolutely hated reading it though. So you had a good combination, but you stirred my emotions. You talked about how Pete Carroll's never had a receiver with 100 receptions, sort of like a little bit of a not like a Brock Bowers fade type tweet, just more of a vibes there. Certainly, I'm in on Bowers. I'm extremely enthusiastic about him. But do you think this offense is going to center a little bit more around let's run the ball as much as humanly possible with Jeanty? Both of these players are going inside of round one in an average FFPC draft. A lot of pressure on Vegas to return value on two young players.
Yeah, well, that was primarily a Dexter meme, so I don't think I hate Bowers, but I probably am out on the Bowers and McBride at ADP outside of FFPC leagues. But so back to Jeanty I think he absolutely smashes. In the game of fantasy football, there are just like players who are built different, who like you want to be bet on to be breaking leagues, and they do break leagues. And so I was thinking about, my prospect stuff. I've done this for, 8 years or so now. And the only perfect wide receiver prospect I ever came across was Ja'Marr Chase. The only perfect tight end prospect I ever came across was Brock Bowers. And the closest thing to a perfect running back to me is Ashton Jeanty, who I'd put over Saquon as a prospect coming out. And I think he just break leagues. And so with Jamar Chase and Brock Bowers, it was ignore the concerns regarding the supporting cast, ignore this, just you want to be betting on these players. But with Jeanty, he actually, I think, unlike Bowers last year, actually has a pretty great offensive environment. And I like Chip Kelly. His track record with running backs dating back to LaShawn McCoy or in college is pretty incredible. So I think it's a great offense environment for a prospect, I couldn't stop drooling over. So I think you nailed it. Rookie season Saquon or rookie season Zeke. I see that happening.
Yeah. And Pat, your Saquon averaged 24 points per game. Zeke was 21.69. So not quite legendary upside, but still incredible season.
Still pretty damn good. Yeah. You take it.
We'll take it. I'll take that one. I'll take that one. The near legendary upside. So we've talked about a bunch of younger backs. Let's talk about the big dog. Derrick Henry is in a pretty solid price tag considering the volume. And you mentioned just how efficient he was last year, Pat. Didn't have 2,000 rushing yards, but he came very, very close to it. Averaged 19.8 points per game. Tons of efficiency metrics. He was yards per carry. He was the best he's ever been. Touchdowns, I think he tied his best ever season. He's going inside of the second round. So, Pat, you could potentially get one of these Malik Neighbors types and then followed up with a Derrick Henry, get that sort of 2v2 balance. Where are you at on the big dog? When we're talking about the 21-year-old running back, there's only two players who average 20 or more points per game. That's Zeke and Barkley. When you talk about the 31-year-old running back, no back has ever done it. We had a Priest Holmes season where he was averaging 26, but he only played 8 games. Curtis Martin holds the highest scoring record for a back that's 31 years old at about what Henry did last year at 19.8. Does Henry become the first 31-year-old to hit 20 points per game this season?
I'm fading him again, so I would fully expect that he does. Yeah. I just think, I don't know. The thing with Henry, it doesn't work, but you got to keep doing it. It's maybe a little ageist, but he's 31. He turns 32 right at the end of this, I think January. He is an old 31. And at the same time, he's coming off, I mentioned, he just has the most efficient rushing season, since at least 2017. The offense is kind of a perfect fit for him. Mm-hmm. You put him. They also put defenses in a bind where you can't just shut down Derrick Henry, or you're going to be dealing with Lamar Jackson downfield. Lamar Jackson also is a much better runner even than Jalen Hurts, so you have to deal with that. And then Henry still looks amazing. I think the thing with Henry though is he can kind of get scripted out in spots. So you have this weird low weekly floor situation, in some of the most high scoring games that the Ravens will be in. Those aren't necessarily Henry's best spots. If they're trailing at any point. Now certainly he can, in a back and forth type of game, he can go nuts and be part of the reason they're scoring a bunch of points. But it is it's such a narrow path for him. He keeps achieving it, and he is one of these truly special players. But you're still paying. Last year, I should have taken a whole bunch more Derrick Henry. That was the discount year. This year you're paying for it now, and I think more than even with Barkley, I'm you're really having to pay the full price of the kind of the range of outcomes on Henry. I'm really not taking Henry. A lot of these guys like Achane, as I said, I'm a little underweight, but I don't want to be full fading. I feel that way about Jeanty. I'm now a little underweight. Don't want to full fade. Henry right now, I'm full fading. It's not if I'm going to bet on, some efficient rushing, I can actually find that later. And I in a point of the draft where I can't find, Scott, you mentioned Bowers being kind of out of ADP. You also mentioned he's one of the best tight end prospects you've ever seen. He's one of those guys. To me, he's this is the dude. You don't get a chance to draft this guy in the second round. He's going to be in the first round forever. Let's take him now while he's in the second round. It is impossible for me to mix it up with it's like Bowers versus Henry. I'm just like Bowers. I'm just going Bowers. I know Henry could beat me again, but he's not gonna. It's very unlikely because he doesn't catch the ball that he's going to turn in one of these mega legendary seasons. It's much more likely that once again he's hitting that 20-point threshold that really does hurt to fade, but it's not like he's not the guy this year. I think Bowers could be the guy.
Yeah, I really don't want to go down in history as an anti-Bowers guy in any year of his career ever. I will just say, read Ryan Heath's latest article talking about McBride and Bowers. It's very dependent on league settings. In a 2 wide receiver 10-team league, very in on Bowers, McBride. But in a typical 3 wide receiver, it changes. I also really like Kittle and Njoku at ADP, whatever. The question we were talking about was Derrick Henry. Yeah. And to make this kind of fun and interesting is I love Derrick Henry this year. And I was all over him last year. I'm even now more bullish this year and age older. And this is what I was just saying. What we were talking about with Bowers, we were talking about with Jeanty is there are just special players who are #built different. You don't want to be betting against. And like, how has fading Derrick Henry gone for those who have faded him every year of his career, where it's like, well, the offensive line isn't good. The offense isn't good. He doesn't catch passes. He's blah, blah. He had 400 touches. We've gotten there a couple times,
Scott. We've gotten there a couple times. It's more often pain.
Right. And so I was one of those, right? And so like you said, this is the perfect environment for him. The most game script sensitive player in football is on the best team in football with a hypermobile quarterback, which is a cheat code for efficiency on the ground. And what I think is most interesting is like, we didn't come close to a ceiling. I talked about Saquon having potentially 25 rushing touchdown upside if Jalen Hurts gave him those tush pushes, which is like impossible to fathom. Derrick Henry very easily could have had 25 rushing touchdowns last year. I know that's insane, but like, hear me out on this one. Lamar Jackson, the last 4 years, here's how many passing touchdowns he's had: 16, 17, 24, last year, 41. Lamar Jackson, half of his red zone pass attempts were converted into touchdowns. His historical average is somewhere around like 25%. So it like doubled. And so I think there's a very real possibility, like, put him at his typical 25. Heck, give him 30. That's still like a leftover 11 touchdowns that could have went to Derrick Henry, who's one of the best red zone goal line running backs in NFL history. I don't know. I just not a player I want to be betting against. And I just see massive upside. He had 1,900 rushing yards, 16 rushing touchdowns. Only one other running back in NFL history has ever done that. And so like, yeah, I'm not panicking over age. Like, build different, freak in the gym, perfect diet, well documented. So yeah, I like Derrick Henry.
Pat, anything to push back on, or is this just going to be a head-to-head thing?
I don't want to be fading him either. I don't like it. Am I going to do it? Yep.
Well, here's a good follow-up for you then, Pat, because we're talking about it's a similar bet. It's a high volume, very efficient running back that you can get, I'd say, about 6-7 spots later, depending on your league. Jonathan Taylor or Derrick Henry this year, who do you want more of?
Taylor at cost. Because Taylor goes in a range where I'm like, yeah, this is about when I should take this type of player. Like, I don't think Taylor has the legendary upside. I don't really think Henry does, because he doesn't catch passes. And so it's like, it is dependent on him hitting those. That was a really interesting stat. Points to some maybe hidden kind of touchdown upside for Henry, but it's rushing efficiency and touchdowns. That's how he absolutely buries me. Well, Taylor has the same path, but he's significantly cheaper, and kind of you kind of hit 2 tier breaks at receiver, depending on when you take Henry versus Taylor, where, Brian Thomas is definitely off the board, but then also probably the McConkey, AJ Brown, the Drake London trio is off the board. Even Rashee Rice is off the board by the time you get to Taylor. And so I'm kind of rated ADP on my exposure is like pretty even on Jonathan Taylor. I think the Daniel Jones stuff, if it's more Jones than Richardson, I think that's probably good because you can unlock a little bit more receiving with him. He was very good last year as well. A talented young running back. If I'm betting on kind of rushing efficiency, like I want the age, and I'll take good plus way younger than all time, but 31, and then you're also getting a discount on it. The overall environment is definitely favors Henry, but yeah, at cost I'll have more Taylor.
Scott, you keep kind of alluding to Jonathan Taylor being a value every single show. Sort of your thoughts here. I just think one thing that's interesting is we have this immense recency bias for Taylor, where he was the league winner. If you got into your fantasy playoffs with Taylor, you enjoyed that 40-point week in week 16, and then a near 30-point week in week 17, 5 touchdowns in those 2 weeks combined. And now the market has sort of been lukewarm to him, but not necessarily with you, Scott. You've been sort of bullish on him. Where are you at on Jonathan Taylor when he's on the board for you at like the 23rd overall pick? Is that going to be an auto pick for you when you get into deep August, early September drafts?
I mean, I don't know that I like him that much. I really think it's just because Chris Wecht, our projection czar, who is so good at what he does, is so down on him. Like, it's forced me to be like his biggest fan, where probably my exposure doesn't really support that. But it's just you look at Taylor, like you said, he had 100 fantasy points over his last 3 games, and like he's been awesome adjusted for injury. In 2021 he was the RB1 by fantasy points per game. 2022 minus his injury games, like the games he got hurt in game, he was the RB9 by fantasy points per game. 2023, from his first start back on, he was RB5 by fantasy points per game. And then last year in games without Anthony Richardson, he would have been like 0.2 fantasy points per game behind Saquon. So as the RB2. So like, that's the kind of upside argument you can make. It's really, kind of like McCaffrey. It's just like, we just need this guy to stay healthy. But yeah, I like him. I think it's more, I just like him a lot more than Chris does, than I'm like, he's a must draft for me.
One running back going a few picks ahead of him was Bucky Irving. And Irving has that two-way ability that we're oftentimes chasing in fantasy. But Pat, could we have chased him a little bit too high in ADP this year?
That's kind of how I was feeling. But I started prepping for my Legendary Running Backs article, and I kind of look at, like, I have a screener where I kind of pull in stuff that kind of points me in the right direction based on the profile that, that I identified, looking at the previous Legendary seasons, like what do these guys actually look like? And for one thing, they tend to be really young. They often are actually second-year players, because that's when we tend to see a big jump in usage, particularly in receiving usage. Achane, although he didn't get there in terms of the scoring, would be a great example of a guy, we saw the flashes year one. There's an opportunity for him to get a bunch more receiving work, and it actually happens. A lot of times we do that with players who aren't second-year players. It just doesn't materialize. But second year is when we actually tend to see leaps in the receiving game usage. So he has that going for him. He was actually used like a good amount at the goal line last year. His career green zone opportunities, so opportunities within the 10, targets, carries within the 10-yard line, he's at 1.6 for his career, just the one season. But the career number for Gibbs is also 1.6. The career number for Bijan's 1.4. Like, ideally you like to see, like, the hope is that we get a season where he's like up near 2. So he's got a little bit of room where we'd want that to go up, but it's starting at a pretty bullish point for an undersized rookie running back. He's only 192 pounds, which isn't ideal because we want these guys to get used a lot at the goal line. But I like that he was used at the goal line. That's, I think, more important than the weight. He was a really consistent runner last year, a super efficient runner last year. And then the big thing for me is that he was just way more efficient as a receiver than I think I had kind of internalized. 1.62 yards per route run. That's really strong for a running back. And then he was also running back 2 in ESPN's receiver rating behind Austin Eckler. This guy's like flashing like a true do everything running back. He's not big enough to where you would expect him to kind of take the Bijan type of path to just being the absolute workhorse, never take him off the field kind of legendary running back. But I think he could kind of get there in an Eckler type of way, in a what we always hoped Aaron Jones would become kind of way.
Those are great comps.
He's showing the ability to score, to be used at the goal line. and to be a real weapon in the passing game. And he's just so much better than Rachaad White as a runner. Mm-hmm. Last year, this time, they were talking about, we have one of the true 3-down workhorses in Rachaad White. This is a rare running back. I mean, they were so bullish about him. So this year, now that they're talking about, oh, we want to make sure we're using both our backs and, we really value Rashad. Like, sure you do. You're not gonna take Bucky off the field if he has the gap that he had last year. And honestly, it might be a bigger gap because he's headed into his first full NFL offseason, or finishing up his first full NFL offseason, and heading into his second year. I think he could show even more as a receiver. And that is the one spot where you would expect Rachaad White to kind of maintain a pretty decent role because he's a bigger back. He can play in pass protection. He can catch the ball. That's probably the most likely thing, is that Bucky still loses a decent amount of snaps to Rachaad White. But as I look at him, like, this is not that big of a leap of faith. This dude is already proven we thought he was better than Rachaad White. Then he quickly proved that he was. He actually was better than Rachaad White than I think we would have even dreamed. And now he heads into a status quo situation in terms of the backfield. Like, it's the same competition he just dusted. And how sure am I that he just doesn't get a lot more work? Because if I'm wrong and he gets a bunch more work, he's going to be a smash at the end of the second round. So he's one of the guys where I was being too cautious and I'm kind of working to get more of now. I would like to be very much overweight on Bucky Irving at the current price. And as someone I'm starting to take over Jonathan Taylor, because, you look at like the rush yards are expected there. He was ahead of Taylor last year. He was a more efficient runner than Taylor last year, better success rate. And, he does a ton more in the receiving game than Taylor, even if we just think about last year. But what about like an Achane type of leap? If that, that's just not even close to within Taylor's range of outcomes. I think it is within Bucky's range of outcomes.
Yeah, and this is I've been Irving over Taylor consistently, and I'm still there. And I feel like when you go with a wide receiver start, and you're able to get Bucky at that 2-3 turn, it just feels like a really dangerous pick. It's a little bit like our conversation we had about Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery in a far lesser sense. But Pat talked about it, Scott, where Rachaad White objectively has been a really, really good pass catcher throughout his career. 165 receptions through 3 seasons as a pro. If he gets phased out a little bit and we start seeing those targets go more to Bucky's upside might be really underrated right now. Where are you at on him, Scott, and your thoughts on this profile heading into the season?
Yeah, so I kind of took the same path as Pat, where I started out a little more pessimistic. Like the counter argument is like, this guy cleared a 56% snap share only twice last year. It's like, is Rachaad White really going to go away? Because he is a really good pass catcher. And then since then, I've kind of, include the postseason, and over his last 4 games, he'd averaged 18 carries, 3.5 targets. Rachaad White was 2.5 carries, 2.8 targets. Bowles said a couple of weeks ago, he said he expects greatness from Bucky Irving. He looks even better. The game has slowed down for him. He's improved his footwork and pass protection. And so, like Pat was saying, is like, what if he just takes like another step forward? He already had elite hyper efficiency and the volume is there. So, I'm probably still kind of solidifying my thoughts, but I'm certainly significantly more bullish than I was about a month ago.
One other running back that goes in this range of drafts, and it's reflective of his very, very strong 2024 season, is Josh Jacobs. Jacobs, of course, signed with Green Bay. He was a little bit less of a talk of fantasy because of the success of Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. But over the second half of the season, Jacobs was just playing fantastic. But Pat, now he's driven up into the late second round. In FFPC, we're seeing him go off the board as the 23rd overall pick. To me, this one feels a little bit too high, and he's been a player that I really am not clicking the button on. Where are you at on Jacobs in this range of drafts?
Yeah, I generally agree with you. I think especially from the lens of, legendary upside, we're looking for these guys who can break fantasy. Like, Jacobs has had his chance to break fantasy. We know kind of what he is. He's a good workhorse running back. He can kind of do a little bit of everything, but he's not really the profile that, kind of takes over a fantasy season and puts up one of these monster years. Is much more the type of guy where, like, in best ball as a 3rd round pick, you're like, great. This dude, I can make use of these points. He's my RB1. I started receiver. I'll grab Jacobs here. I'm doing some of that. In redraft, I actually have less interest. I'd rather kind of try to stack wins at receiver. I'm going to, be working the waiver wire, try to find some of these running backs. They're a little undervalued. I don't have to like nail all of my picks and like definitely make sure I have all my running back points on the roster by, the end of the draft. I think that's some of his utility, is that, like, that Jacobs is going to have a pretty strong role on a pretty good offense, but I don't view him as having that level of upside to where I'm going to forgo, some of the guys I do really like still at the 2-3 turn. Trey McBride is a guy I'm taking a lot of as well, and certainly not an FFPC that late, but in standard PPR, he would be a guy I'm taking over him. Anytime I can get Rice over him, for sure. But that's where I think, like, some of these other receivers that I'm not like super excited about, like a T Higgins, I'd still just rather have a T Higgins, I think, over him.
Yeah, I'm with you, Scott. Any pushback on Jacobs and your general thoughts on him heading into the season?
No, he's a pretty easy fade for me. I think he had an elite run out with the Jordan Love injury. Their pass rate over expectation just totally fell off of a cliff. You've heard the coach, you've heard Love both say it was a lost year for him with all the injuries, and then Marshawn Lloyd too. Like, heading into the season, they were talking about him as their new Aaron Jones. They loved him, and he barely played a snap. So I just think it's more of a committee this year. I think it's a more pass heavy offense, and pretty easy fade.
Scott, we'll start with you on this one, because this is a player that we talked about like literally every single week on School of Scott. During the Chase Brown run out, we were all over him, and he ended up helping people win leagues. Probably the best value at ADP last season. Now you're paying low-end RB1 price tag for Brown. So he's usually an early 3rd round pick, but you're starting to see more and more like flag plant type selections where, Pat, you talked about the lack of enthusiasm, I think, for Jacobs, where he's more of a structural pick. I think a lot of people are viewing Chase Brown as an edge pick and a player that people are willing to reach for. So you're seeing him occasionally go inside of round 2, usually doesn't fall past the early part of round 3. Scott, are we looking at Chase Brown, the sequel, or do you have any reservations about taking him at this increased price tag ADP wise?
Yeah, I like him from week 9 on last year. He averaged 18.9 carries, 5.4 targets per game, easily led all running backs in XFP per game. So I was a little worried that was just, due to injuries. Zach Moss got hurt, and like they were forced to make him a bell cow. And now things will be different with everyone healthy, but, monitoring the coach speak via the coach speak index, it's like Zach Moss is barely on the team. Like he's a strong cut candidate. It really seems like the only guy to worry about is Samaje Perine. So 18.9 carries, 5.4 targets per game. If it's 18.9 and 2.5, that's still really strong for that price.
Pat, your thoughts on Brown?
I would put him in kind of the same sort of like tier or style as a Josh Jacobs, where it's really you're betting on volume. Like we've transitioned to the point where we're betting on these guys to have really, really strong locked in roles. And that's what we got with Chase Brown last year. But is Chase Brown going to be the engine of the Bengals offense? No. Like he's along for the ride. And that's great. It's a great ride. But it's got to be, so to me, that's more of a best ball pick than a redraft pick where, in best ball, like I have the role. He stays healthy. I use all those points. I build a smart team with the idea that, I'm getting those points, hitting my RB1 spot or my RB2 spot very frequently. And I can make use of that. I think he's a fine pick, but not someone I'm actually that excited about. Or I'm just less excited about for redraft, because I think the ceiling is probably like not quite as high as it feels like it should be. because it really is just about like the opportunity created for him by Joe Burrow in the passing offense, as opposed to betting on him as a player.
Yeah, there were games where he had like 14 carries and like 3 targets at the end of the first half, and then he had like 2 touches for the rest of the game just because, the defense is so bad, and like, yeah, Joe Burrow is freaking awesome.
Yep.
So, Pat, we talked about our show we did a few days ago with Debro. Make sure you check that one out if you haven't listened to it, where we talked about sort of the traditional dead zone. So before we get you out of here, who's your favorite running back target in rounds 4 through 7? Is there someone you found yourself drafting the hell out of and you see as a really immense value sort of in this sort of range?
I mean, the rookie running backs really stand out. I think Travion Henderson is a really strong pick. I still think RJ Harvey is a great pick. Omarion Hampton is a really, really strong pick. He's the guy that I've taken the most of those running backs. I mean, I think Hampton by the end of the season is just so likely to have become the running back for the Chargers, and Najee be like a really good backup. That's kind of like what I felt like he's been destined to be for a couple years now. And I think Hampton can make that happen by, the halfway point of the season, and certainly by the end of the season. So he's probably my favorite of the kind of classic dead zone area, because this is not a dead zone type of bet. This is, to me, the Hampton. It's like when we were taking Jahmyr Gibbs at the 3-4 turn when he was a rookie. It's like I'm betting on end of season upside. Not as strong of a profile as Gibbs, to be clear, but a strong profile in a really good situation for his type of skill set, and you're getting him at more of the 4-5 turn or the late 4th anyway. So he's really fun. The other rookies are fun. The veteran that I like the most in that range is Breece Hall, where you are kind of looking to it's kind of the bounce back season in some ways, kind of like Achane, where you're like, let me get that bounce back rushing efficiency. But we have new coaching staff. We've got new quarterback, a little bit of the mobile boost for the rushing efficiency. I think he is just so much better than Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis. I mean, I think the coach speaks stuff where it's like, hey, we're going to use all our backs. And it's like, good. I hope you let them run around all day, every day, and just observe who's the best. That's what I would like to see. Make this as much of a meritocracy as possible. Because if it is, Breece Hall can get a ton of work. Like he's big enough to handle a big workload, and he's very versatile. So, in terms of being also a really, really strong receiving running back, he's a stronger receiving running back than I even thought he would be. And I was pretty high on him coming in. So yeah, he's my favorite of the veteran running backs. And kind of that dead zone range. Getting him in the 4th round just feels awesome. I think his upside, I think he has that kind of that same upside as the guys going in the 2nd round. It's just that the floor is lower. The floor is lower with the Jets, and they're them talking about using other backs in a new regime, and are they as committed to Breece? Like it objectively, the floor is lower, but I think he has that same ceiling, and I'm betting on that ceiling at that price.
Yeah, and Scott and I covered each and every one of those backs at length on last week's School of Scott, so make sure you check that one out. And Pat, we're going to with this sort of a running back enthusiastic type podcast, we're going to get some hero RB drafters, but we'll also get some robust RB drafters who want to start their drafts out running back. If you start out running back, who's your favorite 3rd round wide receiver target to sort of catch up at the position?
Can I say Rashee Rice? Is that cheating now?
Yeah, no, that's not cheating. He's technically a 3rd round pick.
Okay, because we tried this. We took Bauer wasn't a receiver, and in our first main event we went Bauer's Bucky and tried to push Rice to round 3. It didn't work. We ended up taking Garrett Wilson, but Rice would be my favorite. I mean, Rice is like the kind of receiver when if we play in the main event. You see the guys who do go running back heavy. They often go for like just give me those targets, man. Let me get those PPR targets. And Rice gives you that. Plus, I think big time upside is Mahomes' clear underneath to intermediate number 1 target, taking up some of those Kelsey targets this year, and taking even a bigger leap than he did from year 1 to year 2 potentially. So, yeah, I love Rashee Rice. He would be my guy.
And Scott, let's take Rice out of the equation. Same question for you. I'll throw Tyreek Hill, T. Higgins, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Garrett Wilson, and Devontae Adams. Of those 5 wide receivers, who's your favorite right now, your initial lean?
Garrett Wilson. You look at the over-unders on him and you like start to panic, like over under 4 touchdowns, over under 900 receiving yards. But no, I just think I think he finishes like top 3 in target share, first read target share, XFP per team play, like all those use. I just like they have no one else. And I just think he's really good. I just think he's really talented. Even though we haven't seen the true breakout from him. And look at Justin Fields, what he did with DJ Moore. It was the same thing. Just, top 2 in target share, first read target share.
Is it actually good that Fields maybe doesn't read the field all that well? Just lock in.
I like that.
Just lock in on Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, and that's going to be a really, really fun offense for us when you add Justin Fields rushing.
Justin can't read the fields.
Love it. Love it.
Works
love it.
for Garrett Wilson.
So Pat, Wilson would be your pick of those guys as well?
Yeah, I like Wilson a lot too. I mean, I just think the upside is pretty big from like what the season-long target share looks like, all the usage stuff that Scott mentioned, but like also the single week upside in that DJ Moore type of way. Like DJ Moore put up 50 points with Justin Fields one week. Like when Fields is clicking, he's kind of amazing. It's just that like you don't know what version you're going to get week to week, and it's a low floor setup. Sometimes he just doesn't have it, but like he's willing to take chances. He's got a great arm. Like there's some serious upside from a weekly perspective here. And if you're going like running back, it would be nice to have a wide receiver 1 who can go nuclear from time to time. I think Wilson gives you that.
Yeah, I love Wilson. Wilson's been one of my guys all draft season. I think he's an awesome value in this range. Pat, we told you an hour. It's an hour and 20. I really appreciate you being so generous with your time. Give us one bold prediction for the fantasy football season before we get you out of here.
So we talked a little bit about Achane and, some of the returning to the Miami glory days. What if the answer to kind of like, what does, can we recreate the Miami backfield? What if that answer is moved to Denver? And really the Achane Mostert of this year is RJ Harvey and J.K. Dobbins to where it's not about which guy, it's about did you draft one? Did you draft a Denver running back? Because that was the answer. Denver running back for the win. I think getting RJ Harvey back in the 6th, J.K. Dobbins still not high enough. He should still, he could go, kind of more around pick 100, frankly. He's still got like 20 picks. Sure. He could rise another 20 picks. So great offensive line, second-year quarterback that flashed a lot. Still not a ton of passing game. I mean, they're using Marvin Mims out of the backfield last year. What if that was a running back? That seems pretty plausible now that they drafted a pass-catching running back in the 2nd round. So I think, with Peyton's history of running back production, the offense kind of coming into form, and then we're all burned by all of their running backs stinking last year. Well, they replaced the whole backfield. So, maybe that's a sign that they didn't like that either, and they're gonna make major improvements in terms of the production out of the backfield.
Probably the best bold prediction we've ever had on this show, Scott. That's an absolute bar from Pat.
I was going to say, I love this. I think this is amazing bold. I just want to push back a little bit. You draft a Denver running back. Why isn't it just draft RJ Harvey? J.K. Dobbins, he averages 5.5 games played per season over the last 4 years. Like, are we really banking on J.K. Dobbins?
Well, he's going to get spelled by Harvey now.
At cost.
At cost.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Yeah.
10th round Dobbins, 6th
Underdog.
round Harvey.
That's
Yes. That's what I'm saying. It's trust me, I want Harvey more. But I've drafted both of them together in the Achane Mostert vein of like, I think there's a ton of running back production here. And both guys are underpriced, and we're gonna have touchdowns, we're gonna have receptions, we're gonna have some nice breakaway runs. But yeah, Harvey would be my favorite of the two for sure.
Denver Broncos come in at number 2 in our offensive line rankings over at Fantasy Points. Pat, you were awesome today. Let me know once again where they can find your work.
Yeah, legendaryupside.com. Running a free trial on both tiers of the site subscription, as I mentioned before. Check it out. Hope to see you over there. Got a great Discord as well. And Legendary Upside. Check it out.
Check out the podcast Scott recorded earlier this week where he talked about some of the quarterback metrics and stat takeaways. Check out our offensive line episode with Scott DiBenedetto. And if you enjoyed this episode with Pat today where we focused in on the running back position, we're going to continue our positional series. JJ Zachariason is going to join Scott and I on the next School of Scott, and we're going to break down the quarterback position. Stick with us here at Fantasy Points. We're going to help you crush your leagues this season, and we'll see you soon.